We're here tonight to talk about why we feel we should buy Cal-Am. So who is Public Water now? Well, we're a politically diverse group, community-based organization. We're concerned about the huge future rate increases, and we're circulating a petition that'll move us an important step closer to solving our water problems. We're going to talk about that later. Our promise to you is to answer any and all questions clearly and honestly about why this initiative will produce a better water system for the people of the peninsula before it's too late. So what is Public Water Now's mission? Well, it's very simple. Public ownership of Cal-Am's local assets by the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. And I want to emphasize that that is our only mission statement. We do not get involved with other issues, and later on we're going to ask you hold your questions until later, that you keep the questions refined to the issues of ownership versus non-ownership. We won't be getting into issues like growth versus no growth, or desal versus groundwater recharge. All of these are important topics, but the focus of this group is to deal with one and one issue only. So, without further ado, let me introduce George Riley. Some of you may know him, a water activist. His group, Citizens for Public Water, has intervener status at the PUC. He's been on the Technical Advisory Committee and Fee Oversight Committee. He's also the Associate Managing Director of Public Water Now. And George is going to talk about why we must replace Cal-Am. George?
Thank you. So that's button, I mean, that's 3 o'clock button. Got it. Hi. There's a history of failure with Cal-Am, and we all know that story. But we often forget it, and nobody wants to advertise it, but we do. We feel like there's some points that need to be made and consistently made and understood. Cal-Am bought the system in 1966. It has produced no new water supply since then. No new water supply since then. They've drilled more wells in the same sources that exist, but there's been no new water supply since they've owned the system. What they have done is overpumped the 2 resources that exist for the Monterey Peninsula. Carmel River is in overdraft, the Seaside Basin is in overdraft, and it's all because Cal-Am has insisted that they didn't need a new water supply, or they failed to produce one. It's the failure we're concerned about, and the failure I don't want you to forget. Since 1995, when the cease and desist order was issued, which was a demand on Cal-Am to get off the Carmel River, quit killing the river, they have failed in 3 separate projects. There was a Carmel River dam that they proposed in the late 90s that went nowhere. There was a desal plant proposed in Moss Landing that went nowhere. And more recently, the regional desal project in the North Marina site went nowhere. That's the one that's the most controversial so far today, and those costs continue to mount. I'll get back to those costs in a minute. But we need to replace Cal-Am because we are the suckers in this relationship. We are their cash cow. Now, we need the water, and we want the water, and we can get it for a lesser expense with public ownership. But right now, we are a cash cow to Cal-Am. In addition to their past failures, which we are all paying for, Cal-Am has increased the residential rates for water over 100% in the past 3 years. This is a part that they don't like to talk about. They just recently had a workshop on the rate structure, and they said starting in July, they were putting their rates, projecting their rates forward just a month or 2 months ago. Well, they forget, and we don't forget, but they forget to tell you that their rates have already gone up 100% in the past 3 years. And they're still going up. And the residential rates for the Monterey Peninsula are about the highest in the state. Bill spikes continue. This is not old news. I mean, this is not new news. This is old news, but we tend to forget about it. We don't want to forget about it because we want you to be convinced that the right track here is that we've had enough of Cal-Am and its failures and its high costs, and we keep bailing them out. Actually, we keep spending our money for their failures. We still can have the leaky pipes. We have one of the leakiest systems of all the CalAm systems in the state of California. They have about 8 systems, and we're the second leakiest, but we're the largest service area that's leakiest. But my main story here I want to talk about is the dam. Now the blue line represents the dam and its use in providing a water supply. Notice when it really dipped down in the late 80s and 90s, it dipped down. It's because CalAm started using all their groundwater pumps. The yellow is the Carmel River, the red is the Seaside Basin. That's when they started over pumping the basin. But they started over pumping those 2 basins when they lost the supply from essentially San Clemente Dam. And you can see right at the very end of the far right of the chart, there's hardly anything around any use in the year 2000. So let me go back. CalAm needs to take down the dam. There's a process before the PUC where there's a professional staff that hears all the data, conducts all the hearings, all the evidence is filed, back and forth, and the professional staff at the PUC heard the application for CalAm to take down the dam. The conclusion of the professional staff was the San Clemente Dam was not used and not useful since the early 2000s. I showed you on the chart. The dam is an abandoned project. It's not an active project at all, it's an abandoned project. There was no sediment management since CalAm bought the system in 1966. No sediment management at all. These are points that were made by the professional staff at the PUC. The shareholders should be held responsible for the cost of taking down the dam. It was no longer an asset, it was a liability. Yet, and the professional staff at PUC said shareholders should be responsible. CalAm had made misleading statements to the commission. This was in their report that I saw, and that CalAm should not earn any profit on the project of taking it down. Now the reason I want to go over this a little detail is that the story in the community is that this has been a wonderful project, and in a certain respect it has, but the backstory is the more interesting one, and another reason why you should know more. Now the story is that when CalAm bought the system, it was a functioning dam with no sediment management, with no management of continuing that service for any length of time. It ended up in what the bottom right picture looks like. It's just it holds silt. It doesn't hold any water, it holds silt. At the time, people were projecting that the cost that CalAm was going to ultimately spend on the dam was going to be excessive. And this quick flyer, this quick slide, comes from a CalAm presentation about 2 years ago when they were talking about what Water Plus had suggested was a cost of $18 per customer for the full cost of taking down the dam. CalAm was saying no, there is no full cost picture like that at all. It's only going to cost $3 per customer, and this narrative is in their slide. I want to call attention to just the tail end of it, where CalAm makes an insistence that they are the lowest cost option, which was for $49 million. The last sentence here, in far right, in addition, the PUC has made it clear, this is CalAm talking now, and made it clear that it will only support passing costs on to ratepayers, customers, equal to the lowest cost option. Now they're promising you that the PUC will only pass on the lowest cost option. That's a $49 million project. Then they say, why would someone represent otherwise? Now why would somebody, they're criticizing Water Plus. What they're not telling you is that behind the scenes, they were working the commission. They were working the PUC. The outcome is investors win, ratepayers lose. What did they do? They went to the CalAm and lobbied 4 of the 5 commissioners. One commissioner was a dedicated consumer advocate and was probably a wasted effort by CalAm. But the other 4, they lobbied. They lobbied them in a short period of time. Ultimately, the commission voted 4-1 to approve the most expensive side of the San Clemente Dam project, well, the most expensive pieces. They gave them full recovery of all the costs. There's $49 million, which they started with. They added $26 million on top of that, gave them $75 million. This is not the numbers that showed up in the newspapers, not the numbers shows up in what Cal-Am's normally talking about in their press releases. They granted full funding for the financing of all of Cal-Am's loans and full profit. What the PUC did is add $77 million to the cost of the project. It's on your bill today. You'll be paying on it for 20 years. That total cost of $152 million is not the $49 million that was proposed to you. It's $152 million. You're going to be paying for it for the next 19 years. So this $152 million turns out to be about $15 or so per customer. Now, just a slide before, I told you that Cal-Am was ridiculing somebody who said it was going to be in the neighborhood of 18 million, and they were promoting 3. And they're also promising that the PUC would not do anything more than just the minimum. Well, as it turned out, the PUC did the maximum. And Cal-Am was wrong on what they were projecting. They were wrong in criticizing the opposition. And do you think they issued a retraction or a mea culpa or any apology or anything? Well, they didn't. So this is why the PUC is as much of a problem that we have as Cal-Am is. So the two are conspirators, we say, in working against the best interests of the ratepayer and the best interests of the peninsula. The dam fiasco we just told you was almost $80 million more added to the project. The 3 failed projects so far, $50 million and counting. There was a federal enforcement against the deterioration of the Carmel River. It ended up with $5 million. This is not necessarily a big number, but none of these issues are resolved totally today. These are open-ended issues, and all 3 of these can be increased because there are no caps. Total added to your water bill, failed projects, poor enforcement, the PUC rolling over to help Cal-Am, $132 million on your bill today. And we're saying, why do you trust Cal-Am? Why do you trust what they say? Why do you trust the relationship they have with the PUC? Why do we continue to be a cash cow? And what is it that we can do about it? So far, we've got the initiative. The other thing is, we can draw a picture. Now, I hope you can read all the small print. It's not so small, is it? We should not be supporting Cal-Am when we have another option. I'm going to turn this now over to Harvey Billig. He's a doctor. He's written medical journals. He's been a developer of surgery centers and psychiatric facilities and so on. He's been around water. He's been around construction. He's been around finance. He wants to talk about, can we afford to buy Cal-Am?
I think that's the question which everybody has to think and analyze, because we know there's plenty of reasons to buy Cal-Am, but then we have to find out, is this doable? So far, we've not had much explanation about the value, but let's go through and analyze the whole picture. Okay, it's really a very simple formula, and so with that in mind, you have 2 balancing things. You have public ownership, the annual savings by not having Cal-Am in the PUC, and secondly, you have the buyout, the annual bond payment to buy them out. Now, I've been involved in numerous projects that involve both public financing and private financing. And I've been a developer of medical facilities. I've sold 2 companies to New York Stock Exchange companies. And I can tell you, having negotiated those deals and dealt with all the auditors and appraisers, et cetera, there's methodology here. It's not a mystery. So each thing has to be looked at in its own light. So let's go on and evaluate what we're talking about here. Okay? If it's true that this relationship works and we can actually afford to buy them, then why not buy them and get rid of the PUC at the same time? Now, to start with, I think we need to look at the overall chart about Cal-Am's profit loss statement. They're filing with the PUC. Now, this is the numbers from ending in September 2012, the previous 12 months. And that's the latest reporting that we have. Now, it shows operating costs of $27.4 million, depreciation of $5.8 million, property taxes of $1.7 million, debt service of $3.9 million, and profit pre-tax of $11.3 million, meaning their total revenue adds up to $50.1 million. So we need to compare that with public ownership. First of all, in operating costs. Cal-Am is $27.4 million. Under public ownership, we've decided to put $25 million, creating a difference of $2.4 million. But in reality, it's probably much more than $2.4 million, as the PUC allows holding companies to operate. So much of this $27.4 million is actually money sent to the holding company. Now, some of that may be a benefit for the local district and could be hired out to some other entity, but it's very conservative to say $2.4 million would be saved in operating costs. Now, a lot of public utility commissions do not allow holding companies. They will only deal with single entities, meaning they want to see all the expenses right there in front of them instead of having this obtuse nature of holding company. Now, the next thing is to look at depreciation. And I think that the reason we put 3.0 here for public ownership is not that that money is actually spent, but this is what we're told by public finance individuals is the appropriate amount for operating reserves. So instead of actually labeling it depreciation, which is an accounting technique, we're going to call that operating reserves. So again, the difference here is $2.8 million, which is added on to the 2.4 previously. Now, the next items are property taxes, debt service, and pre-tax profit, and all these go away under public ownership. In the case of the difference in property taxes is $1.7 million, debt service is $3.9 million, pre-tax profits $11.3 million. So now we have all the basic ingredients here. So then the question comes up, what is the total? Well, the total is $22.1 million. That's per year of savings. And again, I want to emphasize that's on a conservative basis. So now what will it cost to buy Cal-Am? That's the other part of the equation. Okay, a appraisal suggests less than $125 million. And this was appraisal that was paid for by quite some by Water Plus, and now comps. We're led to believe that Felton is the only thing to compare with, and Felton's a small system, et cetera, et cetera. But in reality, EPCOR, a Toronto company, paid less than $4,000 per hookup to buy Arizona American Water from, guess who? American Water. And that included some facilities in New Mexico. And actually, this is for water hookups, and it's actually, they paid less than $4,000 effectively because there were a large number of sewer hookups as part of this, much larger than Cal-Am, which does have some sewer here, much larger than the percentage here. So, okay, now that's a willing buyer and willing seller. And in Cal-Am, in its own testimony said, well, you can only evaluate something by a willing buyer and a willing seller. Hello? This was a perfect example. This was a little over a year ago. Now, current book value for Cal-Am, because that's another thing that comes up at any time you're dealing with the value of a company, is about $125 million. The sale price, you know, by looking at number of transactions, and this varies with the type of industry, is 1.2 to maximum 1.6 of book value. So even on the outside stretch, it's 150 to 200 million. Okay. Now you're going to hear numbers. And I think Catherine Bowie, the number last time was 400 million. Maybe I've heard 800 million is what they say they're worth now. I'm waiting to see that in print multiple times so they can brainwash the populace. How do you finance a purchase? I've been involved in public finance of several facilities, and in dealing with people that do public finance all the time, they've estimated that conservatively a 5.25 interest rate on a 30-year tax-free bond would amount to $10.2 million per year for $150 million and $13.7 million for a $200 million bond. Now, so there's the question you have to all have in your mind. Can we afford to buy Cal-Am, even using the worst case proposal? Not the 800 million or 400 million myth that might be circulated in the future. Okay, so we're getting back to the same formula, public ownership versus annual bond payment. Now, public ownership annual savings, as we can remember from the previous slides, was $22.1 million. And let's say at 200 million, it was 13.7 million for the annual payment for the bond. Well, we can see right here that it's easily affordable at the appropriate price. Now,
That's not to say that we would offer $200 million, but that is on the high side of what would be determined in an eminent domain procedure if it was required to go that far. Here's the savings as we subtract one number from the other of $8.4 million, or 17% every year. By the way, we have willing participants in the bond market who would love to finance this transaction.
Now, summary here is, can we afford to buy Cal land? Yes, savings will be greater than by financing a bond than actually paying them all these money that they're taking from us. Secondly, we will own everything, because the amount that Cal land takes from our system will be greater and greater the more assets they have, based on the reimbursement allowed to them by our very generous PUC. Now, the savings, everybody talks about, well, what about our children, our children's children? Well, this is an opportunity to really have an impact on that. Now, the next question comes up, is now the right time to buy Cal Am? And I'll turn it over to the boss.
Thanks. Thank you, Harvey. Also, I wanted to mention on the bond funding, 5.25% is definitely the high end. And we've also been told there might be state revolving funds and other things that could play into this, bringing the rate down, which would be a lot less expensive. So, big question comes out about, is it the right time to buy Cal Am? Of course, if you ask Cal Am, they're going to say, no, it's not the right time. All these projects are in the loop. It's something we're going to address. But they also said it wasn't the right time in '78 or in 2005. I mean, let's face it, from Cal Am's perspective, the right time to buy Cal Am is never. What might also make this a very good time to pursue this is the fact that the desal decision's been delayed again by the Utilities Commission. This is potentially allows us to complete the buyout before the desal is ever started. And I think that's an important point to get across. But even if we don't purchase it before the desal is completed, we can thank the mayors for capping the total value of Cal Am with the proposal that they've put together. They've actually allowed a certain amount of public financing, which will not factor into a valuation formula, which in effect creates a cap. And at the end of the day, we think it's time to fire the manager. We've watched the team play for years. We've hoped for new water, hope over hope. And at the end of the day, it makes sense. At some point, you have to look up, you have to suck it up, and you have to say, is this really going to change? I know it's mid-season, but the manager needs to go. We need to get rid of the manager. So, the other reason we think it's the right time is because we have confirmed public support. And we're just showing the results of a poll that was taken in June this year by Bregman and Associates, a professional polling organization. And you can see the results yourself. I don't need to repeat them. But what was interesting were the major reasons why people felt that public ownership and the Water Management District taking over was a good idea. And that was, one, that the money stays in the local economy. We'll talk about that a little bit shortly. And then the second one was they wanted lower water bills. It's interesting, the sequence there. Wasn't lower water bills and then money stays in local economy. Okay, so just to let everybody understand, public takeovers are not something that are unheard of. In fact, there are more public takeovers than there are poor cities selling their systems to private water companies, which they tragically always regret after they get over the initial cash flush that they get from the sale. Two examples are Montera and Felton. And both of these were Cal Am systems. Also, other California communities are in the process of going through it. Ojai just recently had a vote for a bond measure to take over the private water district with an 87% voter approval. And if you don't think that's remarkable, Prop 13 only got 67%. So that gives you a perspective. And Claremont is in the throes of doing this also. And there's kind of an interesting backstory with Claremont. The city next to Claremont, similar demographics, similar size. They kept their system private. Claremont, about 30 years ago, sold their system to a private water company. And then the two communities proceeded to watch the process. Obviously both companies' rates went up, but the degree at which the rates went up in Claremont put them in such an angry position that they're now willing to go out and buy the system back, knowing they're going to pay so many times more than what they originally sold the system for, but they want to get that monkey off their back, and they believe they'll be better off going forward. There are other cities throughout the country, Massachusetts and Texas come to mind, and in all cases, the reasons are because of high rates, substandard service and maintenance, and lack of local control. But can CalAm be forced to sell? You might ask yourself that question. Well, in a very short and succinct answer, yes, they can be. Which brings me to the actual ballot initiative. We're currently collecting signatures to qualify our initiative for the ballot for June of 2014. Obviously, we plan to accomplish our mission. Now, the initiative defines an unbroken line between voter passage and public ownership. So if you hear anybody drawing some sort of strange analogies between the 2005 vote and this initiative, remind them it's an unbroken line. That last thing, which was 8 years ago, was simply to spend a bunch of money to produce a study with no real clear objectives in mind. Okay, so there are three key provisions that we can talk about. It's actually a pretty short initiative, and it's on our website if you want to read it. I, for one, would rather read my executive summary, which I'm going to present tonight. It pretty much covers it, although there's a lot of detail behind that. And you can read it for yourself, but basically we're adding a policy and a rule to the Water Management District which says that as their basic policy, they will work towards public ownership. And if it's financially feasible, they will go ahead and buy the water company to the benefit of the district. This is a huge rule. It changes the tenor of the Water Management District. It gives them very, very clear marching orders. The second key provision is that we ask for the completion within 9 months of a feasibility analysis and acquisition plan that includes a required appraisal, calculations of all acquisition costs, an implementation schedule, and documentation of the net savings in public ownership. Why did we ask for this? Because we want to take a measured approach. We want it known to all the citizens how much money is going to be saved. And in fact, we're willing to bet so much on that if savings are not available, then guess what? The initiative doesn't go forward. But that's not a broken line, because if it does, and we are very convinced, as we showed you earlier, that it will clearly point out that it's economically feasible, then provided the report concludes the purchase is both feasible and beneficial to the ratepayers within the district as a whole, the district is dedicated to immediately begin the process of acquiring the assets through negotiations or, if necessary, through court-directed public necessity hearings. That's a very sweet and kind phrase which basically means eminent domain. Now, we know CalAm has said repeatedly, in fact every time they've been interviewed, they're not for sale. So I'm hoping that when the time comes to negotiate, they'll simply pass a letter back saying they're not interested in negotiating, and then we can move quickly to the next phase. So what are we going to need? We're going to need 7,200 signatures. We're well on our way to getting those 7,200, but at the end of the day, we need 7,200 signatures, and they must be from registered voters who live in the water management district within the boundaries. Okay, and that's very important because a lot of people who live in Carmel Valley and in Carmel and in Pebble Beach actually don't vote here. So they're not going to be able to vote one way or the other, but by golly, they sure get the water bills, don't they? Okay, so we'll be collecting signatures. We started on September 10th. We're going to be collecting signatures through December, and after that, the campaign begins in January, and of course, it'll end technically June 3rd, when the election happens. And it's that point at which the Monterey Peninsula citizens will have their final chance to decide. And you know, when I think about this, it reminds me of a famous quote from Winston Churchill. Churchill said, "Americans always do the right thing after they've tried everything else." And in this case, we have clearly tried everything else. Okay, so I want to take just a minute to talk about what the naysayers are saying to this thing. The claim it will cost money to do the feasibility study and acquisition plan. Personally, I find this kind of frustrating, the idea that if you were to invest in analyzing whether you should do it or not, and developing the actual action plan and lining up the financing and all of that, that somehow that shouldn't magically happen and it should all happen for free. But at the end of the day, I'll say this: it will be a fraction of the cost that we're all paying on our bills right now for Cal-Am for the charges of their failed projects. And when I say a fraction, I'm not talking about 3 cents on the dollar. I'm not talking about a penny on the dollar. I'm talking about less than half a penny on the dollar. Truly a small, small fraction. Okay, buying Cal-Am will cost too much. Well, you already saw our analysis on the appraisal. You know that Cal-Am sees the number much higher than that, but I think that we've tried to take a very rational approach, i.e. look at comps, as well as look at other kinds of business metrics that are used in processes like this. And we see the top end, and I do say the top end being 200 million. So at the end of the day, the one thing I'd like you all to remember is that the final price will be set by a jury, not a Cal-Am spokesperson. Okay? So when you hear them talking about how much they think they're worth, and we all think we're worth a lot, right? I know I'm worth a lot. To me, it's good that they think they're worth a lot. But the fact is that they're really only worth a set of metrics in value, and we've shown that to you tonight. Another one is it'll take too long to buy Cal-Am. Well, our estimate is, and this is actually based on some experience out there, including Felton, that it will take about 3 years after the voters approve it. Okay, and part of that is because there are a number of things that are true about our district. First of all, they have the authority through eminent domain to take over water facilities for the benefit of the community. So a lot of, and secondly, some of the legal maneuverings, like in Felton, Cal-Am tried to move the water district of Felton to Monterey. Did you know that? They tried to move the water district to Monterey so it would be harder for Felton to purchase their own system. Well, I mean, eventually that was turned down by a judge, but it ate up a whole bunch of time. Stall tactics like that are going to be far and few between in this case. This is a standalone system, And I believe that they're going to find, when they sit down with their lawyers, that the initiative itself is very, very tightly written, and it will be very hard to shoot holes in it. And then finally, we hear the issue about the timing is wrong. We all need to focus on new water sources. Somebody said that to me today, and I asked them, okay, what should I do? Well, why don't you write letters to your congressman? I thought, really? Of all the things I've got to do today, I'm not sure that writing to them and and what am I even supposed to ask them? I'm not sure, okay? But I also like to say, well, since the last 19 years wasn't enough time, why is now all of a sudden enough time? Or they need a little more time, okay? And then we also like to add this one major caveat, and that is we will buy what is built. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you right now, okay? But we are basically telling Cal-Am, the mayors, the PUC and everybody else to move forward full steam ahead. Because deep down inside, we know that it's engineers and contractors and construction workers who are supposed to be getting this work done. They shouldn't be out on the political campaign trying to block our initiative. So, you remember seeing a chart similar to this, only this time we've done a projection out to 2018 or 2019 with an assumption that the desal plant is fully operational. Okay, I have grave doubts about that being the case, but the projections are based on both those assumptions. And as you can see, everything has gone up. $96 million is the total revenue, $37 million is the profit. And that is more than doubled. And a lot of that has to do with exactly how private utilities are compensated through the PUC and their formula for compensation. It favors cash investment to such a degree that they probably never contemplated a community that was going to have to triple their investment in a 4-year period from all the money that was ever invested in the water system up to that point. Because had they sat down and thought about that, they probably would have realized their formula wasn't a good one. Not to mention the fact that our peninsula would be perfectly capable of raising all the money ourselves. Of course, Cal-Am won't allow that because that would mean no profit for them. So, take a look, public ownership, we see reductions in a couple of areas and we see zeroing out in other areas. At the end of the day, it actually shows that public ownership with a fully operational desal plant will actually cost less than we're currently paying Cal-Am. And in fact, the difference is greater than 50%. So the numbers before were showing, 40% costs, something on that order, and now we're above 50%. Okay, so let's talk about how we'll be better off with public ownership. I think we all ought to have a feel for that. First of all, the water board's going to be, it is currently elected, but I think the importance of the water board and the importance of elections are going to rise substantially. And we will all have a say as to who serves on the water board. That, of course, doesn't exist right now. The PUC is a government agency with absolutely amazing powers because they were originally chartered to fight against the railroad barons. Unfortunately, they gave them so much power, they're basically unapproachable and they're not elected. They're appointed, they serve 6-year terms, and so the question is, how responsive to a local area are they going to be? In this case, under public ownership, they're going to be locally elected. They better be responsive to us, or I personally, as well as a number of the other activists, will go to work to get them unseated. It'll also, under public ownership, will eliminate the outsiders, Cal-Am and PUC, from telling us what to do. Now, I know we've said that several times, but believe it or not, some people are unfamiliar with the fact that the PUC has no authority unless it's a private utility. Okay, I even had a person arguing with me the other day. Oh no, that's not true. They're called the Public Utilities Commission. I said, well, the name is absolutely the Public Utilities Commission, but they're charged with supervising and managing private utilities. They really should be called the Private Utility Concierge. Okay, we're also going to be able, under public ownership, to eliminate millions of dollars wasted on the paid interveners and the high cost of PUC proceedings. I don't know if many of you follow the newspaper, but by golly, every time they seem to need to scratch an itch, there are 15 interveners and 20 lawyers filing 35 briefs amounting to 3,000 pages before a decision can be made. And guess where those costs wind up? On our bill. Also, based on a national study, we know that we will enjoy lower rates. Lower rates, we've demonstrated that. It will take work. You can't just let the public entity run without supervision, but we will have lower rates, and national studies show that private utilities are 33% more expensive. And then we're looking forward to localized service for local needs. Not a call center halfway across the country or all the way across the country. I don't know if any of you have ever called for service, but I did when I got a giant bill one month, and it was an extremely frustrating and upsetting situation. Now, I was lucky. In my case, it was the meter reader who switched two numbers, and all of a sudden, but what had amazed me about my bill was, normally I use, and I'll make up a number because I don't remember, let's say 10,000 gallons, and the misreading said 20,000. And the one that was, say, 10,000, my bill was $150. But the doubling of the amount of water I used, and my bill was $835. I mean, really? Double the water use and quadruple the price? So, continuing right along, the money will stay in our local economy, and at the end of the day, I think that's going to be worthwhile. Now, of course, we're going to have to pay a bond, we're going to pay a price to them, and we're going to be paying that off. But left alone, leaving everything as it works right now with Cal-Am, over $300 million would go to corporate headquarters in profits over the next 10 years. That will leave the economy forever. Okay? We also could look forward to truly competitive bidding. Maybe that sounds counterintuitive, but if any of you are familiar with the Poseidon and Carlsbad deal, Poseidon is building a desal plant for the San Diego, a consortium of 6 of the water companies in San Diego. And basically they've set up a deal where Poseidon does the financing, does the building, does the managing, does everything. The cities, what do? They agree to buy a certain amount of acre feet per year at a certain price, which, by the way, the price is somewhere between $1,800 an acre foot to $2,200 an acre foot, okay, which is far less than what our desal facility is supposed to be costing us. Here's the kicker. At the end of 30 years, the water districts have an option to buy out the desal plant. And the cost, $1. So, as a publicly held organization, not only could we talk to all the different companies who want to build, but we could talk to companies who might even want to do the funding for us. Somehow they're willing to do the funding. Their investors are willing to make the percents that they're making and yet deliver a product at such a considerably lower price. The other thing is, I personally would be looking forward to full disclosure on all projects. And then the other thing to mention is that public grants are possible. not only in funding and financing things, low interest rate funds are possible, but out and out grants where we're given money. For example, Santa Cruz was given $12.5 million to test intake systems. Ironically, one of their tests, one of their analysis indicated that slant wells weren't good for them. Well, at least they did it on a grant. We're probably going to get to pay for that analysis. Okay, and at the end of the day, we would be water system owners, like 85% of the country, not water system renters. And I use the analogy owning versus renting, and it doesn't completely hold up, but at the end of the day, it does give you a very good comparison. If we own our water system, it will benefit us like owning a house does. And now I am pleased to introduce our guest speaker of the evening. Before he comes up, one of the notable things here, you can see a lot of things that Mark's done, including being a former county supervisor, but he was a co-author of the county's public desal ownership ordinance. And you can see he has extensive experience. Now we asked him, we wrote out a list of the few things that that he could talk about, and we thought, well, he could be, you know, the theme is I'm mad as H, and you should be too. And after we were done with the list, we thought, oh goodness, I think we better cull it down a little bit. So let me introduce Mark Del Piero and our culled down list. Mark?
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. The truth of the matter is that I was invited here tonight because I met my friend George Riley, who has spent more hours working on this issue than any human being could possibly tolerate. But I met him in 2005, and I told him we should buy Cal-Am in 2005, and he said, oh no, that's not something we should be doing. And so I'm telling you so. I've lived in Monterey County all of my life, and some of the people who have been real pillars of the Monterey County communities that we've all lived in and benefit from living here, those individuals, some of them are sitting in the audience. Is Nancy Selfridge here tonight? Okay, is Brenda Lewis here tonight? Okay, any other elected officials here tonight besides Brenda Lewis? Nancy's here? Great. Okay, and Brenda's here too? And Junie Lehman is here. And no other elected officials. Wow. What's wrong with that picture, ladies and gentlemen? We just got a great deal. If you read the newspaper, my bill went up last month. In fact, your bill went up last month. You all look like very nice people. It's tragically sad that what the California American Water Company is doing to our economy and our peninsula is killing our economy in our peninsula. In the 19th century, there was a brilliant guy, most people don't know who he is, his name was Benjamin Disraeli, and he said there were three kinds of falsehoods: lies, damn lies, and with a little 21st century addition, Cal-Am statistics. I point this out because the three gentlemen who spoke before me tonight have outlined for you a simple truth. A very simple truth. We are paying exorbitant, unnecessary water bills. Many of us have known this for a long time. Many of us knew that at the time the California Public Utilities Commission continued to willy-nilly raise rates without any consideration for the actual consequences on the local economy, or worse, on senior citizens, on young families with children. When they gave no consideration to any of those things and simply told us what a great deal we were getting, many people believed it, but some of us didn't. Now everyone is starting to come around. And I point this out because this has been a process that's gone on basically since 1995. Actually, it's gone on a lot longer than that, because in 1995, when the State Water Resources Control Board handed down Order 9510, it said Cal-Am's been stealing water out of the Carmel River. I can tell you that because I sat on the state board in 1995 when it ordered 9510. The vote was unanimous. And I'm pointing this out to you all because you all took the time tonight to show up here. And whether you are here because you believe that CalAm shouldn't get reimbursed for its continual failures of the projects that it's proposed and been able to build over the course of the last 20 years, or if you feel that because they allowed the San Clemente Dam to be silted up, maybe they shouldn't have been allowed to recover the cost of taking it down after they depreciated it from us, the ratepayers, or if you feel that all of those flashy, multicolored mailers that you get in the mail that are being sent to us at your expense maybe are not necessarily telling the entire truth about the water situation on the Monterey Peninsula. If any of those reasons are why you're here tonight, those are all good reasons for you to be here. But there's even more basic reason. Someone's in your pocket and you did not give them permission to be there. People are raising your rates and you have nothing to say about it. And the whole purpose of this meeting here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is to say once and for all, in Monterey County, in the state of California, in the United States of America, regardless of all the rest of the problems you hear about on the 6 o'clock news or the 7 a.m. news, here we actually believe in something called democracy. We believe that water that under the Constitution of the state of California belongs to all of the people should not be a monopoly. It should not be. And when CalAm says it's not for sale, my response is, big deal. Who cares? I'm not a willing participant in your continuing increases in my bills. My backyard looks like a hayfield because you haven't created a new water source in 25 years. All you've done is steal water from other people. It's time to end that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here tonight because I'm just like you. I'm an attorney in private practice. I'm not holding an elective office, although it would have been nice if some of those folks had shown up here tonight. I mean, you know, it's not like this is an issue of no particular consequence to the general public or to their constituents, but the fact of the matter is, I'm a private citizen. I'm here tonight just like these three guys are here tonight because we're concerned. We're concerned not so much about our bills, we're concerned about what is happening to the Monterey Peninsula. We're concerned about the fact that senior citizens who live in Carmel or Carmel Valley or Seaside, who are on fixed incomes, who aren't going to see any massive increases in their Social Security checks, are being told they have to pay more for less. And the thing that is really of concern to me is when many of us try to do the right thing and conserve, we're penalized for it. CalAm goes to the PUC and gets a rate increase so they can cover their shortfall in their profits. If you think that's a good thing, then I'm wasting my breath, ladies and gentlemen. But if you think it's a bad thing, if you think any of the things we've talked about here tonight are bad things, sign the petition. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark. I guess I'm pretty clear on how you feel about all this. So what can you do? We want to talk about that just for a minute. Obviously, one of the things you can do is sign the petition. In fact, you're not voting for it yet. You're just saying it needs to be on the ballot. We need to have that debate. Of course, I want you to vote for it also, but one step at a time. Secondly, you can help us collect signatures. We have neighborhood coordinators all living throughout the peninsula. You can go to their house. You can get that quick 5-minute training and get out there. You'd be surprised how easy it is to collect signatures. Most people are just going around their neighborhoods, talking to their friends. Our neighbor, 2 houses down from us, has collected over 40 signatures, and she's just done it with local friends. Although she did tell me she cornered her contractor the other day and told him she wasn't paying him until he signed. I told her that's not really legal. I think she was kidding. The other thing I'm going to ask you to do is to please, please contribute. This is an expensive battle. Doing things like this, which we love doing, that everything costs money, lawyers cost money, and we need as much help as we can get. And I'm guessing, basically, we've been asking people to give at least 1 month's average water bill, because we know we're going to be able to save you at least that much in the first year of public ownership. It's not tax deductible, but it's an investment in the future. And from my perspective, it's an investment for my children. Also, we ask you to talk to your family, friends, neighbors, and favorite businesses about tonight. Honestly, most of us believe the economy is going to be choked on a very slow chokehold, and it's going to have far-reaching implications. And then finally, we invite you to come out to our website, publicwaternow.org, for the latest petition information. To stay up to date, we have a Facebook page as well, and so forth.